State Policy Meeting to order. If we could please have a roll call.
Howard.
Here.
Dallas. Here. Alden Jackson. Harris.
Here.
Moran.
Here.
Parker. Here. Rice. Here. Chumanello.
Here.
And Parker.
Here.
We also have a form. We also have her books.
Steve, can you lead us into
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we can move on to approval of minutes for the regular meeting of August 9th. All in favor? Motion carries. Okay, we have a couple reports that were in your packet. We're going to move right on to the travel policy. We can have.
Didn't expect that.
Get you right on there.
Morning. Morning. Morning, Sue. Thank you. Thank you. All right, so there's no better day than today to talk about the new business reimbursement plan, right? Right.
Rip it up like a Band-Aid.
So we do have a executive summary. Is that correct? That was given out to the committee.
This fit in our
Yes,
packet?
that was the packet.
Okay, we got it.
14 pages?
That was
Yeah.
last time. It's
Yeah.
not in this one. It's not in this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
You
got
guys have it.
it.
We have had one page
Yeah, it's just a one page, it just says update and we'll executive.
executive summary.
I have
What I was
14
looking at was
pages.
more than one.
Yeah, we got red.
The whole thing.
Yeah, we got those.
It's a lot of pages. Yeah, it's a lot of pages. It's a lot of fun.
Okay.
Yeah, bullet points. Can you
Turn your mics on.
Turn your mics on, please.
Whenever Grant does that,
There we go.
Duffy,
Is that better?
he does this, you can't do it.
All right. Can't see it. All right, we should have been given a bullet point. It goes through the policy, the per diem, the lodging, the business-related purpose meals, and the one-day business travel. Basically, the policy is explanation of the policy. Again, throughout the years, IRS has updated its regulations, and they've issued a number of regulations which define the requirements for reimbursement, and this Will County business travel policy is designed to meet them. Okay. The per diem is something that will be discussed. It has been discussed. I believe, if you remember, it was May that we discussed it very briefly. But the meals and incidental expenses incurred through overnight travel will be reimbursed at a flat rate based on the location traveled. So this is different than what is currently done. Right now, you submit all receipts. It's done to cost. So this is what is known as the Continental United States CONUS flat rate per diem. There's a website that is referenced. That website can be found online, and you submit your program information, your business purpose. That city is then referenced, and that per diem rate is then paid back. There's a few things that help. The IRS only requires that we have what is called an accountable plan. As long as you, as long as our organization keeps a accountable plan which has a good process for receipting and record keeping, we can choose the way in which we do this. So suggested in the past by, I believe, a number of people, including Commissioner Don Moran here, is a good idea. It's a good idea. It's going to be easier for you, easier for all our employees that record keep this rather lengthy process. Some of the departments, like the health department, who else? Definitely the boards. You know, definitely you guys spend a lot of time traveling, going to meetings, going to different board and committee meetings, and this will help out. The lodging expenses, again, it'll be paid through the county procurement card where available. So mostly, when you guys are putting together a trip, you're paying ahead of time with a county credit card, or procurement card, not a credit card. And we're paying ahead of time the exact cost. So the lodging will be a part of within our accountable plan, the lodging will be prepaid. In instances that you do pay ahead of time, and it's not through the county procurement card, then that will be done at cost and paid back. As always, any business-related purpose meals, you must have records to prove the specific business purpose or some other specific business benefit at some future time. So if you're looking on now with this bullet point, thanks, Beth. We've gone through the top 4. So what we had done was, by request of the county board staff, Melissa and Bruce, we've looked at this rather lengthy business policy. This was about 2.5 times the size of it previously. And they've asked us to make it simpler, whittle it down, and it has not been updated in about 10 years. So it's about the right time to keep this thing fresh and green. One big change, again, I'll go back to the per diem. That one big change, the overnight travel, that's something that we're stating now, that you do need to have overnight travel for purposes of meal reimbursement and any per diem charge. There's another part at the bottom that specifically defines the one-day business travel with no overnight stays. So there are cases where you would be reimbursed for your meals and incidentals if you do not have an overnight stay. That requires, yes, in certain cases, they are taxable. So really, the IRS says you can, this makes sense, as part of your compensation benefits, any sort of compensation benefit policy, we can actually administer this any way we'd like, but based on past practice, the review of the county board, and now, this is what you would be then deciding as well. So the IRS regulations state all meals claimed on one-day business travel are taxable. Meals claimed on one-day business travel are reimbursed and will be taxable with wages in the following cases. And this is what was set now. Meals must be reasonable based on the facts and circumstances. And then breakfast eligibility requires travel begins prior to 7 a.m. Lunch receipts are required. And then dinner eligibility requires travel concludes after 6 p.m. That basically encompasses the 14 pages.
Okay, so the difference, so you're saying like here, but the difference here is one, it's now with the locations, that's where we're gonna have them on dollars. So that would be the one thing that is different. Then also, of that in fact of if they're overnights and like what you're doing and the breakfast, and if you haven't, I know that was always though the case that if you're say at NACO and they offer a lunch, you don't get then to put in, I'm not gonna go to that lunch, I'm gonna go somewhere else, but that's on your own. So is that kind of what it was always?
Okay, so that stipulation that you remember, that I remember that conversation we had.
Right.
That is actually defined in the IRS regulations again. So there is a part that Kathy has been looking at, and we've studied pages of IRS regulations. We did find one paragraph that says, meals and incidental includes meals, tips, and fees for food, and yada yada. Make sure the yada yada gets in the minutes. And, however, an employer is not required to reduce the meals and incidentals even if meals are provided in kind to the employee, if the employer reasonably believes that the meals and incidentals will be incurred. So, unfortunately, the IRS uses the word reasonable a lot. So we sort of have to decide that upon management and discussion. But at conferences, we would reasonably believe that you would receive some sort of meal or sort of some continental buffet of some sort. And after discussing, we really thought, how do we stipulate what's reasonable? Is a 3-day-old leftover ham sandwich left on a silver tray, is that reasonable? And we're gonna deduct that $12 from your reimbursement cost? You know, how do we actually look at that? As far as an accountable plan, it makes more sense just to go with a broader view with that paragraph on the IRS.
And also, so everyone knows, one of the, stemming fact of why we are even having this conversation is that we're gonna have to go and vote. This is now with the new legislation that came through, which, you know, talking with Bruce, I really wish Bruce was here right now, and hopefully he'll be walking in any minute. You know, he had the concern, we're not the same as with the municipalities or the park districts or even Forest Reserve or what we have, because we have Duffy, we have an auditor, so we do have an officer that it goes through. Am I
Yes.
correct? I mean, did we
Correct.
figure out any of?
Yeah, we went through that, we met, Kathy, Bruce, and I met on that issue. So we do not believe that you have to approve these at an open meeting because there is the verbiage in that statute that says it would be approved at an open meeting by the governing body or by the authorized officer. So we have an authorized officer. So we think we're already in compliance with this law.
So this was I forget the House bill number, but that was passed,
Yes.
part of our public acts, it's saying that all reimbursements have to be approved by the governing board of that municipality or local government, or administrative process. So there is administrative process for us, just the same as you don't see a list of bills every month that the county board has to check off on. There's, again, public acts that write to, through our process and through the auditor's office, can be reviewing and recommending the payment of those bills. Same holds true, correct?
Correct.
For the
So
there's
these
no
are
actions that we
countywide
need to
elected
do.
officials whose duty it is to review the bills. So you already have those positions, those oversights in place.
Okay. Thank you. You know, you can just pick up a newspaper any time of the day or night now and actually look at something along this line about an elected official abusing the system or gaming the system or et cetera, et cetera. And I do understand why this is going to this point now, because in the past, I know the school boards, they didn't receive a salary, but they were traveling. Many of them were travel. And then there was somewhere, there was an abuse of the actual travel expenses. So basically that became compensation. So when somebody would say, look, I didn't get paid or whatever, but you know, when they were traveling, they were staying at 5-star hotels and, you know, et cetera, et cetera. I can see all this. And unfortunately, I think that we're just in a system now that we have to go to the weakest link. I mean, we have to put rules and regulations in place to cover any possibility of a problem. And ironically, the thing that kind of upsets me about this whole thing is basically that's why elected officials are elected. That's why you have trustees. They actually review the bills. They're supposed to be reviewing this same way as county board members. We're supposed to be reviewing this. And again, we have another layer of protection. We have the auditor's office that actually reviews this. So I just think that, you know, we can't be too safe on this stuff. You know, unfortunately, that's our society right now. That's the way that the public feels about it, and I just, you know, if it seems so stringent, it's an obstacle, so be it, you know, I mean, but that's just something that we.
But there's nothing we have to do, because that was the biggest thing of just saying, there's nothing that we had to vote on. And everyone knows, you know, this bill all kind of came out from the whole shenanigans that were going on with the College DuPage. But, you know, common sense anywhere, right, so what was going on there, but I can remember Naperville Park District had a big debacle as well, so they all.
Yeah, there's so many cases right now. There's
Right.
Winnebago
It's just-
County, and we go to the
We
famous
can't
Dixon
fathom
case.
it, we don't have credit cards.
Yeah, there's so many cases that happen so often that only the scale of the fraud or the problem is actually surprising now.
Well, and this isn't just, this policy that we speak of is not just for us sitting in this, I mean, it's for all of county employees and everything that has, you know, that has
Yeah.
our, but that's your job, that's what you go through, and we have you,
Correct.
so it,
Yeah, and that bill really looks to smaller units of government that don't have any layer like this. But our process, we do, just to explain, the employee has to sign and give this to the supervisor. The supervisor has to sign off on that, just like any other bill. So we then receive that. And really, the only counties that have this administrative process of the county auditor are those over 110,000 in population. So it's really meant for larger units of government that don't have, I mean, it would just not be possible and practical for you to look at the 65,000 bills that are paid each year.
Yeah. Just by way of clarification, Suzanne brought up when we go to NACO, and oftentimes there are meals offered. If we didn't eat those meals, for example, if I stay in a hotel that offers free breakfast, but I need a kosher meal, I don't eat that stuff. Do they still reimburse you if I went down to the hotel and bought breakfast because I need kosher? Do they reimburse that even though the hotel offers a free breakfast?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, do you have, I saw some documentation, you said, Duffy, you have to have some type of support documentation say why I have to have a kosher meal?
Yes.
I can explain, but I won't do it now.
No, happily, the IRS does state that if it's in kind and it's reasonably,
It's not a $50 breakfast.
Yeah.
I understand.
and again, when your staff and our office went through this sort of nitty-gritty, some of these particular considerations, and it sometimes, you know, we've been to these conferences, your meal might be, you know, several football lengths away from you, and you're just wanting to get to, you know, the expo center and talk to a committee member. That's where, thankfully, the IRS regulations do meet that. So
Okay.
we can just,
That's a perfect scenario. Because that happens a lot during meetings or whatever, and you can't get to where that lunch is being and all that. You can't get
There is one thing, though, I want to point out that the IRS talks about over and over again, is that you must have a substantiated business purpose. So that's where your agendas come into play. So if we have an agenda, that's your backup for saying that there's a legitimate county business purpose. So that they really harp on that. And then the other thing that they harp on is tax home, which is, I wanted to point out that there's going to be a little change in the policy on page 5.1A. It's actually not a change, it's an addition to 1.5A. Traveling away from tax home. I define what a tax home is because at first I thought a tax home was where you reside, and that is incorrect. A tax home is, the employee's tax home is the general vicinity of his or her principal place of business. So it's more like the metropolitan area that your business is in. So it would be like the Joliet metropolitan area, and that's your beginning, that's your tax home. So I just added that in there.
so that'll be changed within the definitions.
But they really talk about this tax home and this overnight and substantial rest thing. So substantial rest does not mean you pulling over in a rest stop and resting for even 3 hours. That substantial rest means overnight stay, so that's huge. And that's been, a couple of Supreme Court cases have talked about that, so we're not getting away from that overnight stay business. And then the difference with that becomes a taxable versus non-taxable thing. That's different than what you guys have today, that we guys have today. And I think that's it. Those are the only things that happened yesterday that I wanted to
Paragraph 4A, I guess it is. No, I'm sorry. 3D is my first question. In our existing policy, it says if the conference ends before 5 p.m. or earlier, then you must travel home that day. The Department of Labor, I know for labor unions, I work for labor union, says that if you're not home by supper or whatever, you can't get home by supper that day, that you can spend the night. My question is, we're at a conference in LA, the conference ends at 5 p.m. You can't get to the airport till 6 p.m., 2 hours before your flight. Your flight leaves at 8 p.m. You got a 4-hour flight home. Now we're talking midnight. and an hour drive home from the airport, or an hour and a half after you get your bags and drive home from the airport, you're talking about 1:30 in the morning, what becomes a reasonable number? Should that be 5 p.m. Will County time maybe? Or should that be, it's part of our existing policy, it's been in place for a long time, but I think as long as we're addressing this whole policy, that number may be something that we want to look at.
Sure, we can take a look at that. If there is some sort of regulation or code that says that in the Labor Department, we will reference that and we can come back. And we'll have to research that. Beyond that, most of the IRS does meet those standards, so we'll double check.
The International Foundation for Employee Benefit Plans, they may have something at their website about it, because I know it's come up in conferences in advance.
And it's if you don't,
If you can't get home before supper time.
you don't arrive at your home by supper time.
Right.
And that's, again, a reasonable,
That gives you an idea.
reasonable
I mean,
sort of
no
decision.
matter where you're at, what the conference time ends, or whatever. I mean, if you're on the East Coast and that's at 5 p.m., that's probably okay. You're an hour and a half flight away. You're going to get home by 10 p.m. or something like that. But if you're on the West Coast, this 5 p.m. number doesn't really work out.
So, great, there doesn't seem like there's that much even of change, and like you're saying, we don't have, so now it's just now more of an informational thing that we're having, we don't have to vote on it, it's just, we're retweaked. Yes?
I have a question for Mr. Blackburn. On page 13 and 14, there are 6, page 13 and 14, there are 6 basically diagrams of different amounts per day, per diems. And I'm wondering what those correlate to, because there's nothing that says any, well, it doesn't say specific.
Where to go to the website.
That is what that correlates.
Yes.
But those 6, right,
You go there.
right, I understand it, but what are the 6, do you know, or?
Yeah, that graph, this table represents the per diem allowable reimbursement for meals. So those are some of the standard rates that you would see. And then the standard lunch, dinner, and then expense.
So you would go to the website, determine which zone you're in, and then come back to this chart and determine what?
You would go onto the website, once you put it in the zip code or the state, the city, or the county. Sometimes most larger cities will have this particular information. Sometimes the smaller will be grouped in county-wide or regions. Staff would do that as well. So you would just be putting in where you went. Most of the time it would just be a program, and staff, as we understand throughout our departments, once employees put in their information for their programs or agendas of their conferences, just one is needed for the rest of the staff. But if you are interested in looking on the website to just see these rates, once you put in that city or state, you'll see these corresponding the columns show up.
Yeah, I just find it interesting. I mean, it's one of these columns, $75 a day for food.
These are the only rates, by the way. These that you see, those are the only standard rates based upon location. 74 is the highest, and that's like California and New York. Chicago isn't even 74. I want to say we're either 64 or 69. And the county board staff, this changes every October 1st, by the way, possibly changes every October 1st. They will have the 30-page, copy of, in case you ever want to see like what 74, what 69, where your travel destination is. Monterey is 74. San Mateo is 69. I don't know what the logic is, but yeah, but you have that, and these are the only rates you'll have. Now remember, this includes meals and incidental expenses, which is tips and tax and everything.
Okay, no, does anyone else have any questions? Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Happy traveling.
Happy travel. And you'll get this out, the new policy out to everybody, is that how we're
Requires a
gonna?
resolution. Yeah, requires a resolution. It'll be on the board. It's on the board agenda.
We set the policy.
Yeah. you need to move this
Well, that's what I
forward.
meant, but I mean, everyone will receive
Oh, yes.
a copy of that. I'm thinking
Oh, yes.
employees.
Your distribution.
Oh, yeah, once we make
Yeah.
up
Bound copies.
Yeah, that we get bound up every,
Yes.
Do you
every.
need a motion to move it?
Yes.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? All right, motion carries.
Duffy, are you gonna look at that 5 o'clock thing before we roll it in?
We will look at that 5 o'clock to make sure it meets all regulations needed.
Steve, would you like to give a update? What's,
Certainly, I'll be brief. I'm Steve Roder. I'm with I'm with Westcom, also the Will County 911 Board. I'm the vice chair. I was at the statewide 911 advisory board meeting on the 29th of August. They had some hearings on consolidation. It became quite evident to the audience that the state is kind of picking and choosing the way it rules and the way it selects what to do. Just as a review, there were 3 exemptions to following the consolidation law. One was economically unfeasible, one was technologically unfeasible, the other one was danger to public safety. They've somehow introduced a 4th exemption, and that's time. The law calls out for all consolidation to be completed by July 1st of 2017. As we all know, even in Will County, that's an impossible task, but it's the law. And for some reason, they have invented this new exemption for time. The ironic part about it is both the Emergency Telephone System Act and the 87 cents per line fee, both those laws will terminate June 30th of 2017, but the board itself has been issuing extensions, up to 2 6-month extensions, which are way outside the boundaries of the law. So it's been very confusing. It's caused a lot of angst across the state. One of the things that I have consistently brought up in front of that board is the fact that Will County is several months behind in its payment for the 911 surcharge, and that on a consistent basis, the fund has retained $10 to $13 million statewide. We're continually asking them why are they sitting on that money, and I've never gotten a rational answer. I've been challenged to check the daily balances with the comptroller's office, which I have, and very ironically, this week, instead of $10 to $13 million, they're now sitting on about $16 to $17 million. So it's quite evident to a lot of the folks that were in that audience that we are being set up for another sweep. So Will County continues to be months behind in its payments from the state. I believe we were just paid for March, April, so we're still behind. So and there's no rational reason that the state could give us as to why they're sitting. None of their arguments make any sense.
and I do know, talking with the contract with Leslie, she said, literally, the minute she gets those
Yes.
in, like they're priority, like
Correct.
she goes and writes those and they're off.
The ironic part for the state of Illinois, the money is there. They're collecting it dutifully from the carriers. All you people that have cell phones are paying that 87 cents. The money is there. It's earmarked, it's set aside only for 911, although they've swept it for other purposes. But the money is there, and the chairman's absolutely right. Comptroller Munger's office says as soon as she gets the warrants are paid, period. And she's been very consistent about that. So the hang-up is not in the comptroller's office. Someone, I think, has been telling the folks at Illinois State Police to delay the payments. There's no other rational argument that I can find. So we're constantly battling that. If the money is swept again in December, like they're threatening to do, or there's rumored to be done, that will be every year since 2008. Money has been swept, meaning federal government deems us unstable, meaning we don't get any federal funding for next generation 911 improvements, which we have self-mandated to complete by 2022. So we're hurting ourselves every time this happens. As far as Will County itself goes, Will County consolidation has not had a hearing in front of the administrative judge. I don't know why. It's been handled internally by the 911 administrator, and she has granted a time extension, which I said before is kind of above the law, but there's a time extension, and Will County ETSB is required to report on the consolidation efforts in March. Ironically, the 911 administrator might lose her job in January because that's what the law calls for, so I'm not sure who's going to be in charge between January and June. I asked that question and I got kind of blank stares.
Say that, Lawrence. Why is
The
she-
statewide 911 administrator was appointed by the governor. She was supposed to have been affirmed by the Senate. No one can confirm or deny that that happened, so she's just sitting in the chair. I don't know if she's been confirmed or not. However, the law states that her job terminates, I believe it's the third Monday of January, as far as 99-6 goes. We don't know if she's going to be reappointed. We don't know if she's going to have to go through another Senate hearing, if the governor will reappoint her. I hate to keep bringing bad news to this committee, but it's kind of a mess.
Yeah, I actually have a question. The state's not paying them the money that they're supposed to pay, that they've already collected. So how are we operating in a deficit all the time, or are we able to maintain, or how are we able to function without that money?
There is some reserve money. The 911 board has been very judicious in not paying for certain projects. They've been kind of fending off the vendors because of some performance issues, which is another argument. But they have not taken on additional projects, so we're kind of being very prudent with the money that's there. So, we're getting by, but it's just simply not correct. I mean, there's going to be expenses coming up to the 911 board because of the Laraway Communication Center project. We think the money will be there to buy the consoles and do everything that needs to be done, but and Steve had to submit his budget to your auditor, and we're okay, but it's just there's a delay in payment.
So what I'm getting at is, does the state look at the 9/11 boards saying, well, you know what, they've been able to function without this money all along, so guess what, we're going to sweep it all. And so now there's a point where you're not going to be able to pay, your employees even probably. At one point, that's what I'm getting at. Are we at that point yet?
No, we're not at that point. We have some reserve money. We've been holding off on major purchases. The staff at 911 has not been threatened with layoffs, or that's not even in the cards right now. But we are obligated to do technological improvements under the state law. We have to move ahead with next generation 911. That's expensive to do. We have no money set aside to do NG 911. So we're kind of put in this box that we've got these unfunded mandates that they continue to unfund. I mean, they just not fund us.
I have a question, and maybe Mary could answer this. Okay, the service provider for the cell phones, they write a check to the state of Illinois treasurer, correct? So that check goes to the state of Illinois treasurer, and then you said now it's the state police?
Right, the Illinois State Police have taken over all functionality for 911. The Illinois Commerce Commission has now been relegated to regulation only, whereby 911 systems are now under the purview of the Illinois State Police. There's a specific office within the Illinois State Police called the 911 administrator. There is a staff under the Illinois State Police that collects the money that's been remitted. His name is Carl Pound. Carl makes out the warrants, divides it up by the formula that's in the act, sends those warrants to the comptroller's office. The comptroller very quickly pays that money. For some reason, there is a delay with Carl, and we've challenged Carl on it. We don't get clear, rational explanation of why the money is being set upon.
So my second part of the question is, Mary, can we write a letter from the County of Will to this Carl and just basically request, say, Carl, you got to pay up, you know what I'm saying? Because here's the situation, and as a resident of Will County, I don't want anything ever to jeopardize when I have to, unfortunately, if I'm ever in that circumstance where I have to call 911. I want somebody there at the other end of the phone, and I want the most expedient response possible. humanly possible at the other end. So, I mean, I think as a board, as a county, we should say, hey, look, you know, here in written documentation, then pass it on to all our legislators and say, this is what, there's a problem here. Well, I mean, everybody, it's easy to keep saying the state screwed up, but we've got to be aggressive on this. We've got, I believe that we have to actually do that. I mean, is that something we can do?
You can always write a letter.
I take every opportunity when I'm at the 911 advisory board to explain the same thing I'm explaining to you. They're tired of hearing me, but they're saying, you know, maybe one day the squeaky wheel will in fact get the grease. And
because is that the entity? Carl has all the authority?
that's a good question.
Who's Carl's boss?
We have asked the Illinois State Police for a hierarchy chart. Who works for who? We've got Cindy Barbarelli, who's the 911 administrator. She has no staff. We've got the old staff from the Illinois Commerce Commission that's been plugged underneath Colonel Kelly Walter, who's in charge of the Illinois State Police for 911. We're not sure who works for who and what staff works for which person, to the point where if you call one person with the same question and another person with the same question, you get conflicting answers.
Bruce?
I would suggest that, following up on what County Board Member Howard has said, that perhaps Steve can work with Nick to do a letter from the executive to this individual raising the issue, and then next month, let's pass a resolution. But also, I'd like to point out that in terms of squeaky wheels, there are a lot of squeaky wheels in this state. I mean, and a lot of those wheels are going to come to a stop very, short if something isn't done, so.
Well, and this isn't the first time, and this is what I was wanting to say as well, we're saying about the state police. Well, before it was the ICC, I mean, this has been happening. This has been a history of, unfortunate, of these sweeps. I don't know if it's just an easy help. Jim, did you have?
I have a finish your comment.
No, I mean, but it's been going on a long time.
My comment would be, Bob, when you talk about, well, we'll send a letter to this, who is ever in charge of the state police, for example. Those are the bureaucrats. Those are the employees. They don't set the policy. Somebody's telling them not to release those funds. It goes beyond, I think, the bureaucracy or people who work in state government. You can't help but think it's either the administration, the governor, and the legislators. I know that I think sending a letter to a government employee who probably really has no real authority whatsoever, they're taking some direction from somebody, I think it would probably be a waste. I think you have to continue to talk to the governor's office, whether we send our concerns again to the governor's office, the legislators. I think we just keep, they split Will County into 1 million pieces. We might as well see if we can take some kind of advantage of it and use all those legislators that have a portion. I know the Governmental League, for example, I think their legislative breakfast is coming up soon.
You?
Yeah, it's October 13th.
Yeah, but, so, I didn't even see it.
Anyways,
my point is maybe we can, maybe that's one of the questions we can make sure, ask there, there's a lot of people there, and we can express some concern, that these funds affect all our communities. The ESV board or the 911 board, I like to use the ESV because not to get confused with people who dispatch. Their function is to make sure that we have the latest technology. That money's paid by everybody who has a phone line, everybody who has a cell phone, specifically for this purpose. Those funds were never intended to be diverted for anything else but emergency phone system. And they can reallocate them, send them more downstate, whatever, but the money should have never gone for anything else. Most of these ESV boards were put in place, if not all, were put in place by referendum, and that was the expectation of the voters, is that they were passing a referendum to modernize their emergency phone systems through through this tax. So I still think it's a legislative issue or elected official issue that we have to pound on them.
Oh, I agree, 100%.
And not pound on some state worker.
Yeah.
I am glad that Hugh is here today, because Hugh, that is one thing, you know, as we're talking about the possible revamping in June with the ETSB board or whatever, I really would like to see you involved in having also, where you can also be the voice of all the municipalities and everyone that in Will County. And if we can have this onto the agenda with the governmental leagues, just to keep everyone abreast of what's going, because as we know, especially with consolidation, there's been a little bit of a split, but we have to work as one, as in Will County.
I'd be happy to provide whatever information you want. We're collecting a lot of stuff at the ETSB level. I try to go, or at least listen in to all the 911 advisory board meetings. I'd be happy to supply whatever data you want. Thank you.
I'm in support of a letter/resolution plus working really aggressively with the legislators, because I think there's certain power in recognizing the problem. I don't think Bob's saying that, you know, they're going to get the letter and say, oh, or a resolution and say, oh, they say we better do it now. But at least it's an acknowledgement of the problem. Above and beyond, working with the state legislators to say what's going to be done and keep the conversation multiply going, although it will be one of many problems we're trying to resolve too.
And Will County is known for being very, very vocal, you know, thanks to Steve, but in all of us, of going down and saying, hey, you know, what are you doing? So this would be nothing different, and for us to be leaders in this and getting a letter out. I think that's a great idea. I think, Bruce, that was an excellent idea for Nick, you know, to talk with Ted Walsh and get that. And then we could get a resolution out, I think. You know, it's, you know, is sit there and say, and be like, okay, God bless. What would this, you know, do? But we're doing something. I mean, we have a voice, and we could get that at least acknowledging this is what's going on. Because the other thing too that Steve had made comment, there is some outstanding bills and some large bills that are going to be coming through with the new generation technology. That's going to be a problem. So
the other thing that I think we all need to pay attention to is that when these two laws terminate in June 30th of next year, not only will the consolidation be rediscussed, I'm sure in some form or another in the new legislation, either to do more of it or to enforce what's already been done. The other key to that is the 87 cents. Because of the way they constructed the law this last time around, Will County is subsidizing other counties. We're not keeping the money that's collected in the county. So what they embedded into the law was what they call make whole or hold harmless, meaning if my neighboring county was charging $1.80 and Will County was charging 75 cents, the amount of money going to both systems had to remain the same. Well, you can't do that when everybody's universally being charged 87 cents. The math doesn't work. So I pointed out that at some point in time, this is going to be a house of cards where it's just not going to self-sustain. And we wind up subsidizing the other counties. And I think that's inherently unfair, but all for one for all. I like to see ubiquitous, available 911 statewide, don't get me wrong. But the funding of it is, to me, very unfair.
And we have different rules and regulation in how we do in the payments than Cook County. Cook County's its own, they don't even have, like, well, they're outlandish. I think they're $350, I don't even know.
State of Chicago.
Yeah, the state of Chicago. So it could be worse, is what I'm saying.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve, for everything you do. You work so hard on this. Okay, there's no other new business. No need for executive session. Is there any public comment? Okay. Can I have a motion to adjourn? All in favor? Okay. Well, yes.